What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 24 of my Puckpedia offseason series. Today we got the Seattle Kraken. Seattle, now that they've made the free agency moves, or more so moves they didn't make, um, they got a lot of young pieces on the roster, as well as a mix of older pieces on the roster. A few of which I think would be great flips for them to kind of get some assets in return for. Um, Most of those moves, like those types of moves, I think will be made at the deadline. I think that's where you'll see the guys like Schwartz, Eberle, Alexiak, maybe even Marchment, who they just traded for. But I think those are all guys you could see gone by the deadline. But this offseason, or at least what's remaining of it, I think you'll probably try and see them going for some trades that'll help get them younger. Maybe be some more long-term plan type of moves, trying to find some younger guys to help cement their roster more. So coming into the offseason post free agency, they currently have $12 million in cap space to work with. There's a few moves they should be making or pretty soon here with their RFAs. They got Capo Caco and Riker Evans both as RFAs. I think Kako filed for arbitration, so it'll be interesting to see if he actually makes it all the way to arbitration or not. But if he does, I don't see him getting a ton of money. But if he doesn't, I think he'll get more if they can come to an agreement beforehand. But realistically, I think it's probably one of those situations where Kako wants more than he's really worth. And that's why they'll go all the way to arbitration, because I don't think the Kraken will, cave into his demands. So first move I'm going to make here, I think, he's going to be UFA eligible in 1 year or 2 years, I believe. So if he goes to arbitration, he's only going to get 1 year, because that's how that works. If he was 3 years away from UFA status, he could get 2 years in arbitration, which I'm pretty sure would be up to the team themselves to determine how long they want him for. But I think an independent arbitrator who's looking at Kako's career resume with the Rangers, and also the short time he had with the Kraken where he played really well, I think that'll give him a bit of a pay boost, just because he's going to be staying with the Kraken. And I bet, the expectation of him modeling that performance that he already had is going to be, a factor in his arbitration negotiations. So I think a fair value for Kako, looking at it from the perspective of a pure independent moderator, I think he'll get somewhere around 3.4 million. And that'll only be for the 1 year because of his UFA eligibility. So that'll pretty much slot him in on the first line, honestly, as of right now. I think finding chemistry in this lineup is probably what Seattle wants to do. And the thing is, they don't have any like top end guys who need to be playing on the first line. So you could see Kako switch with Eberle, you could see him switch with Tolvanen, and any of those guys could play on any of those three lines. And it's the same thing on the left wing. Honestly, any of these three guys could be interchanged. I don't really see McCann going on the third line, but I'm not going to dive too much into that because you'll see why in a little bit. But the next move I'm going to make, so I put Alexiak on his offside here because he's a veteran D-man, and he's a big trade chip right now. But honestly, his $4.6 million contract is a lot. The Kraken could retain 50% on it if they were to trade him, which is very possible. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they trade him, but I just don't really see it happening because I don't really see a team giving up a big package for him. They could dump him for like a fourth maybe, but I don't know if the Kraken would necessarily want to do that because he is their captain, and I think the intangibles that he brings is probably going to be worth more than the value they'd get from him in a trade. So unless they're planning on making a big move that would put him up against the cap here, I think Alexiak stays, and even if they do move him, it'd have to be with retention. So it would be hard to move on from him. So I'm going to put him on the third pair on his offside, because the other guy I'm going to bring in here is Riker Evans. Using AFP Analytics contract projections, it looks like they have Riker Evans projected. Let's see, long term 5 mil for 6 years, short term 2 mil for or 2 years for almost 3 mil. Realistically, what I could see happening is a 3 year deal. That's probably going to be a little bit more than 3 mil, like 3.2 mil. Maybe even 2 years only though. Maybe we could do 2 by 3, but I think it's gonna be 3 years, something around this, and that would pay off great for the Kraken. So that'll put him on the left side. I actually think he'll slot in above Ryan Lindgren by the end of the year. Maybe he'll start on the third pair, but I just don't think Ryan Lindgren's going to be worth that contract they just gave him, even though he's only 27 and he could totally prove me wrong on that deal. But I think ultimately he'll probably end up on the third pair. And a guy like Evans, who has a lot of promise and is really young, and has played pretty good in his time in the NHL so far, I think a guy like that would easily slot in above a Ryan Lindgren type on the second pair. So we're going to put him there. And then the only real hole they have left is their fourth line right wing. John Hayden could play there, but I just don't think that's, he's not going to really do much for you. And you have the cap space to make a move with the remaining free agents. Another thing is Yanni Nyman. He could totally start the season in the NHL if he has a good camp. But realistically, from what I've seen and what I kind of think is that he's still 1 year away. He could totally make the jump by the end of the season, but I think at a camp he'll probably be in the AHL. And then after that, maybe like towards March or February, he can make the jump to the NHL if he's playing good. So, but as of right now, he'll be in the AHL. So in order to just fill that hole for 1 year, looking at the remaining right wing UFAs, there's not a ton left. Just because the UFA market's pretty thin now, and a lot of the guys re-signed where they already were. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to sign Nikolai Kovalenko, 1 year, $900K. Maybe he's worth a little bit more than that, just a little bit more based on his production. But I think if you're a UFA this late in the offseason, this long after free agency, it's been over 2 whole weeks now. You're not going to get a ton of money. That just means teams probably aren't giving him what he really wanted. So if you want to play in the NHL, you probably have to take a little bit of a cheaper deal, whether you think you're worth it or not. But if he wants to go back to Russia, to the KHL, he could totally do that as well. So, but either way, it doesn't have to be him. Honestly, it's any fourth line right wing depth guy who you could get for like less than $1 million. You just throw in the lineup to plug this hole. And I think Kovalenko kind of fits their build a little bit just because of his age. So I think that's a good fit for them. Another thing I just want to talk about, though, is, the Kraken have a ton of center depth, not just in their lineup, but coming up through their system, and a lot of young center depth, too, at that. So they have Beniers, 22, Shane Wright, 21. And you look down here, they have Rakoff, who's 20, Fisker Molgard, 20, Catan, 19, and Jake O'Brien, 18. So what that makes me think, and they have Chandler Stevenson signed long-term, which not a great deal for them. I'm sure they'll be trying to move on from that deal sooner than later, but still, looking at their center depth, that is way too many centers, and they honestly have a lack of other positional prospects, especially on their wings. They have a few defensive prospects, I think, but it's really on their wings where they're lacking. So I could totally see them making a move to try and, get better on the wing, whether that's a prospect or an NHL-ready guy. But I think they have a lot of centers they could trade to make room for that, because it's not going to hurt their pockets too much, because, they have at least a bona fide 1, 2, and 3C for the foreseeable future. Granted that at least 3 of those guys pan out, which, I'm sure they will. Beniers is already solid. He could be a career 2C. I don't really see him living up to the 1C, but, maybe he has a breakout year this coming year. He's only 22 still, so you never know. But I could easily see Beniers taking this 2C and Shane Wright having an even bigger year than last year and breaking into that 1C role, kind of showing the promise that he really showed when he was a prospect in his draft year. But you never know what's going to happen there. So for now, we'll leave it like this because this is how they're going to start the season. But don't be surprised if Shane Wright works his way up the lineup all the way even up to the 1C maybe in the next few years, as well as having guys like Catan, Jake O'Brien, Fisker Molgar, and Rakoff be able to break in the lineup. So that being said, with all those centers they have, I am going to make a trade here involving one of them. But that's not the main piece of that trade. The main piece here is Jared McCann. He's in trade talks, and I think he has a lot of value, similar to like Raquel and Rust. Pretty cheap deal, especially considering the production that he brings to a roster. So I'm kind of looking at a team here with a big trade chip who the Kraken could really use, and a team that's cap strapped and could use cheap scoring like McCann. And that's the Dallas Stars, and they got Jason Robertson on the trade block. So I think if a team were to make a run at Jason Robertson, I think the Kraken are probably a perfect type for that. They have a lot of young tradable assets. They have NHL-ready tradable assets, and they have picks to trade as well from that Tampa trade at the deadline, where they got the 26th and 27th first from the Lightning for Gordon Bjorkstrand. So if they really wanted to make a trade work for Robertson, they definitely could. It's probably going to require a lot to give up, but if you're the Kraken, you need needle movers at this point. You look at this roster, what's really lacking is star power, and that's exactly what Robertson will bring. So trading for Robertson, I think trade would look like you have to trade Lucas Dragicevic. He's a good defensive prospect, has a pretty good chance of being a top 4 D-man in the NHL one day. So you're going to put him. The center prospect that I could see going would be either Fisker Molgar or Rakoff. McCann's going to go as well in that trade. So it's probably going to be Rakoff. I think he's just the better of the two. But honestly, like same thing with Dragicevic. It could be him or Caden Price, and Rakoff or Fisker Molgar. It's up to Dallas, whichever ones Dallas wants more. So I'm going to say at least one of those 2 defensive prospects, at least one of those 2 center prospects, McCann, and then some draft picks, which it'll be a 2026 first and a 2026 second, which will be the Kraken second. And I'm giving the Lightning's first because the Kraken's first will definitely be a lottery pick. So I don't think they'd want to give up a lottery pick like that unless it's like top 10 protected, which in that case, if it is, you do your 2027 one, but like at the same time, like I don't see that being anything more than a lottery pick as well. So it's like choose which lottery pick you want to give up. And I understand Dallas doesn't really need lottery picks, so obviously they'd probably rather have that over the Tampa pick, but I just don't think the Kraken would want to give it up. So I could totally see them having to give up both of these Tampa first as well instead of the second, which maybe I could even throw that in on this trade because the package for Robertson probably won't be cheap. And if he does eventually get traded, I'm sure it'll come down to a bidding war between who can offer more. And I think Anaheim's another team that could probably make a deal work pretty well. But for now, this is what we're going to go with. I think this is a pretty fair package for Robertson. If you're Dallas, you do lose some scoring, but you also set yourself up pretty well for long-term success on top of the roster that you already have. The thing is, I would give them more NHL guys on top of McCann. I could give them Eberle, Schwartz, and maybe they could use those guys in like their middle 6, but they just don't have the cap space. Honestly, they don't have the cap space to make it work. If this deal were to go through, this would leave them with $1 million cap space after shedding 2.7. So like, it's they don't have the cap space to take on more NHL guys. So that's why I'm giving them 2 solid prospects, 2 firsts, and a pretty good roster player in McCann. That should be enough to get a deal for Robertson done. And that's exactly what the Kraken need, star power, because Benir's not at that level yet. Shane Wright's not at that level yet. You have guys like Catan and Jake O'Brien in the system who could totally reach that level and have a really good chance of doing that, but they're not there yet. And Robertson would totally be a long-term thing as well. So it's not like you're trading for him like for this 1 year left. Like if you were to trade for him, obviously you'd have to have an understanding with him that he would extend there, because obviously you're not going to go give up that whole package for that. Maybe you do a sign and trade with Dallas, But it was just rumored the other day that his ask is Rantanen's contract, which is 12 mil, which, to be fair, I don't think he's worth what Rantanen and Marner are worth. He's not worth the same. But Rantanen and Marner are both in no tax states versus Robertson being in Seattle, which is a heavily taxed state in Oregon, Washington. So, the 12 mil there isn't as much as 12 mil in Texas or Nevada. So maybe I could see him extending for the 12 mil. So we'll go ahead. We'll do that. 12 mil, 8 years, lock him up long term. Everyone's happy. He gets what he wants. Dallas gets a good return for him, and the Kraken fill a need on the roster. And that'll hopefully help bring in more star talent, So you never know how that'll all play out. And on top of all the center depth they have coming up through the pipeline, obviously someone's got to mesh with him, right? And even after making that trade, they still have more centers than they need to make another big trade in the future when someone else is on the trade block, whether that be a defenseman or a forward, because their defense down the line is looking a little shady. I wouldn't want to stick with this decor long term. You got Larson getting older, Alexiak getting older. Lindgren, you're committed to. Montour, you're committed to. I mean, Montour's still solid now, but a fall off is inevitable. Same with Chandler Stevenson. But I've said in many videos before, that's the price you got to pay for UFAs. You got to overpay for more term than they're worth till they're old. So we'll see how those deals play out and if Seattle's able to dump them down the line. Philip Grubauer as well. It's a little bit of a cap anchor, but at this point, he only has 2 years left, including this coming season and the season after. So it's not like you're stuck with that for too much longer, and you're not going to be good when he's on the roster. So it's not like it hurts your window at all or your cap situation, because he'll be gone when it really matters. So that's going to do it for this video. I don't see the Kraken doing a whole lot for the rest of their offseason. Again, they have a lot of young trade chips and guys who, obviously they have a log jam that's going to be creating here in the center position down the line. So we'll see how that all plays out and what they do with those guys to maybe strengthen their other positional needs. Most importantly, their wings and their defense. Again, Yanni Nyman, we could totally see him coming up throughout the season at one point to, fill in a hole, maybe in that middle six. I don't think it's worth bringing it up to play him on the fourth line because that's just not his game. You can't force a guy into a role that he's not meant to play. But at the same time, you look at this log jam they have here on the wings with just mediocre guys who are probably middle sixers. And, something's got to be done if Nyman's going to come up to make space. But at the deadline, they have a lot of trade chips. And I think they will be a busy team at the deadline. Once they're out of the playoffs, or that's clear they're not going to make it, you have a lot of guys in Eberle, Schwartz, Marchment, Alexiak, who could all be attractive rentals for teams that are trying to contend. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. And, Kraken fans have a lot to be excited about because their prospect pool is pretty young and it's pretty promising, and a lot of tradable chips and more lottery picks in the future coming up soon. So, yeah, we'll see how it all plays out. But thank you guys for watching. Let me know your thoughts on this roster in the comments and what you think the Kraken are going to continue to do this offseason. I like hearing what you guys have to say about my rosters, if you think they're accurate or not, if you think the trades are fair or not. And I'm also going to link this roster directly in the description. So if you can't comment on YouTube, go ahead. Or if you don't want to comment on YouTube, you can go ahead and comment directly on Puckpedia. It could be a little bit more anonymous if that's what you'd rather do. Annoyingly, Puckpedia is now blocking me from linking my videos in the description. So it's a little frustrating because I can't get video traffic from Puckpedia now. So I would appreciate you guys, sharing the channel any way you can if you like the videos. I'm going to keep doing videos all summer, similar style to this. So more things on the way. I got a few more rosters left before this series is over, but it is starting to come to an end. So I appreciate you guys watching as always, and I will be sure to catch you in the next one. Peace.